You cannot kill Bitcoin. They've tried every single way to kill Bitcoin. You can't kill it because it's so well designed.
Hello and welcome back to the CoinStories podcast. I'm your host, Natalie Brunell, and we are talking to some of the leading voices in Bitcoin, their backstories, how they were first introduced to Bitcoin, and their take on what the cryptocurrency offers. I'm so excited to share my very first guest is the incredibly kind and intrepid Peter McCormack. Peter was kind enough to be my first interview for this series, so thank you, Peter. And he really did a lot to introduce me to both the space and the people in it. He hosts a wildly popular podcast that you have to check out called What Bitcoin Did, and it explores the cryptocurrency with a range of thought-provoking voices discussing the biggest news angles and philosophical elements of Bitcoin. He has a fascinating journey of how he got into Bitcoin, so here's my new friend, Peter. So you're from Bedford, United Kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
What is that town like? It's
just a typical small town, a typical shit town. I love it. I love it because it's my hometown. But it's it's just a small town. Nobody really knows it. Doesn't really stand for anything. We don't have a successful football team at all. We have a small rugby team. We've got a couple of known people. We have a runner called Paula Ratcliffe who was a marathon runner, and she represented Great Britain in the Olympics. I think she might have won a gold. She was mainly known for stopping during a race and taking a pee at the side of the road. We're not known for anything. We're just a little town with a nice river. It's beautiful here, but some people would call it a shit town, but I love it.
Well, so what was it like growing up? Like, tell me about your childhood.
My childhood was very normal. I've got a brother and sister. They're both older than me. I'm basically an accident. My father and mother never admitted it, but they had I don't think you have a boy and a girl a year apart and then 4 years later think, let's do this again. So I'm pretty sure I'm an accident. Very normal childhood, working class. My dad was an aircraft engineer. My mother a nurse. And basically my dad just worked very hard to put us through a good school. He wanted us to have a good education, which meant he worked lots of shifts at the airport. His shift pattern would be 4 days on, 4 days off. Typical engineer shift pattern, 12-hour shifts. But what he would do is in the 4 days off, if there was overtime, he would always take it because he had to earn enough for our school fees. And then he would occasionally do this thing called the ghost shift, which was basically a double 24-hour shift. It was called the ghost shift. And he used to do that. He worked a lot. He was busy, but it was really good to us. And my mum mainly spent most of the time looking after us around the house because Dad was working. She worked as well some of the time, but later on in her life, she decided to become a nurse, as I mentioned. But I think she was about 40 when she studied her nursing, and became a nurse for 15 years, and that was her real calling. But it's a very normal childhood. Just nothing really stood out. We would just run around the fields and go down the river and just hang out.
Well, so here in the U.S., a lot of people refer to that kind of lifestyle as just the middle class or upper middle class. Is that what the United Kingdom's like as well?
I wouldn't call it upper middle class. Some would say it was middle class because I went to a private school, but my dad put all his money into that. So there's things we went out with a lot for that. My parents went out with an awful lot. My dad, never had the car he wanted and things like that because he put that into his education. And when I was at school, I'd hate my dad to hear this and not take it the wrong way, but I was kind of like the poor kid in a rich school. You'd come back from, say, Christmas holidays, and everyone's be talking about the presents they got, and these kids would get like a Nintendo and a TV, and we never had that kind of money. It didn't bother me, but I think it drove me on, but it never really bothered me. But no, I would say we were working class, but my dad wanted more for us and just really worked like a trooper to give us like the best education.
I actually can really relate to that because I'm the product of two immigrants. So when you were young, what did you want to be? I mean, you seem to have had an interest in music and media as well, I'm assuming?
Yeah, the music one's an interesting one. Yeah, not many people know about that. So this stuff's kind of come all full circle. So what happened was when I was about 15, I decided to start a fanzine, like a music magazine. I don't know why I did it. I just woke up one day and thought I'll do this, and interviewed my first band. And my friend Tom, who now works with me on my other brand, Defiance, his dad had you would call it a realtor. He had an estate agent. So I'd go and use his print out copies of it and staple them together and go to concerts and give them out. And then I would send them to the record companies and ask to interview the bands. I did 4 issues, I think, and I got to interview Korn and Pantera,
some
and
big
Slayer, and some decent bands. And I used to get into all my concerts for free, and I'd get all my CDs for free. And
you were just a teenager, right?
Yeah, I was like 15. My dad used to crack up because every week in the post I'd get like 40, 50 CDs sent to review. So for this little magazine, and then I ended up contacting 2 of the record companies and saying, "Can I do some work experience? Can I come and trial work?" And they were like, "Yeah." So I spent a week at East West Records working there, and met Mick Hucknall, and I met, what's her name, the singer, the crazy one. Oh, I can't remember her name. And then I did a week at Roadrunner Records, which is a metal label. Had like Sepultura on them, and I was convinced I wanted to work in the music industry. I wanted to work in A&R, like finding bands. So I went to university to study music industry management, but the course was terrible, and I just lost interest and ended up wanting to start my magazine again. It was just when the internet was starting, and I thought, well, the best thing to do would be to make it as a website, so I didn't have to deal with the printing. And so one summer after, when university had finished, I stayed in High Wycombe where I was, and I bought a book about HTML. And during the day, I would work at this factory, and I'd come home in the evening, and I would just read this book and learn to build websites. And then I got into my 3rd year of university, and my landlord asked me to build a website for his business, and he paid me about £500, which at the time was a lot of money. I was working in a bar earning £3 an hour. And then his friends who ran a recruitment company said, "Oh, can you do one for us?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I just threw out there. I said, "Well, it'll be about £2,000." They went, "Yeah, fine." So I did that, and I was like, "Wow, this is great." And then I put my name up on a message board for developers. And do you remember when the internet first came about?
So I remember my parents got this Compaq computer. Is that what it's called?
Yeah,
Compaq?
Yeah.
And I remember signing on to AOL with the dial-up sound and literally using AOL like chat, and my mom being like, "Don't spend too much time on that."
Well, that was right at the start, and we had this .com boom where it's a bit like what's happening with Bitcoin, right? All these companies were like, "We're going to build this business, we're going to build that business," and they would get millions of investments. And I got contacted by this company called eCountries, and they wanted to build a network of information for international business travelers. And so they phoned me up, and they were like, "We've got a job, a freelance contract in London. Are you free?" And I was like, "Yeah." And they said, "Well, listen, we can only bear in mind we can only pay £900 a week. Will you do this?" And I was like, "Yeah." I mean, like, I was a broke student, so I was like, "Yeah, of course." So I went off to there, and I decided I was going to quit uni at that point because I didn't like the course. And
could you not have switched to like development or computer science classes?
Computer science isn't a thing in the UK like it is in the US, and I was in my 3rd year at that point anyway, and I was just like, I was looking for a way out. And then weirdly, like one night, I had a big night out, and I woke up in the morning, a bit of a hangover, and I got this weird phone call from my uncle asking how my sister was. It was really weird, and I put the phone down, and then there was a knock at the door, and it was my brother. And my sister had been run down by a police car. It's about 50 miles an hour, and she broke both arms and both legs and lost all her teeth. Yeah, it was awful. Gosh. So me and my brother ended up driving to Addenbrooke's in Cambridge, which is a very famous hospital that's a big hospital for deals with a lot of trauma. I think they've got a big cancer centre. So she was in intensive care for a week, and then she was in high dependency for a long time. So I missed about 2 months of university, and I used that as my excuse with my dad to say, I have to defer this year because of, I've missed too much. He was like, fine. And then obviously I knew I wasn't going back, and I carried on earning really good money, making websites.
Wait, can I just ask you, I mean, HTML and coding, it just seems like something that's really hard to learn on your own. Or maybe I have that impression because websites are so obviously advanced now compared to maybe when the internet started. So, I mean, did you feel like you could really teach yourself that enough to start getting these contracts for companies?
I mean, HTML4 was very basic, which is what I learned. You create a head tag and then you create your, whatever, your table tags, and then you bold the text. And the websites were so basic and simple back then. And the websites I were building them didn't have a database. They were just like adverts. This is who we are. You can, and call us on this number. So, for example, the recruitment company, they weren't posting jobs up. It wasn't that kind of time. And so it was very basic. I did try and learn JavaScript, and I was like, I couldn't. And then there was this thing called Flash. Do you remember Flash on the websites, like the animation? Yeah, so I ended up becoming a Flash developer. So I learned ActionScript, which was the coding language of that, and just made these kind of weird animations or animated websites. But I'm not a creator. I'm more of a manager. So I knew I would advance out of this. But yeah, then I turned around to my dad and I was like, he turned around to me and said, "Oh, have you registered back for your final year?" And I was like, "I'm not going back, Dad." He was like, "What?" I said, "Dad, I'm earning this money." He said, "You need something to fall back on." I was like, "Well, I'll fall back on it when I need it." And I we had a big row, and now he's, he looks back and goes, "Okay, maybe you were right."
Yeah, I bet. Okay, well, so what did you do next?
So I carried on freelancing for a while, and then a job came up for a company in Bedford. And it was a senior sales role, and I decided to take it. It was a salary-based role. And then I left them after a year and set up a company, moved to London. And my girlfriend at the time, well, we'd only been together 6 months, got pregnant with my son. So that was a big whoa. And then I got offered the job in Bedford, and I was like, with a kid coming, I need to do this. So I took the job, and I stayed there for 6 years maybe. And I ended up becoming managing director, having a shareholding. But I kind of realized the shareholding, it was a small shareholding. It was like 12.5%, and I was doing all the sales and growing it. So I turned around to my main account director. I said, "Look, I'm leaving. I'm going to just set up my own agency." And he was like, "Can I come with you?" And I was like, "Yeah, fine." So I went down to London, and we set up this company called McCormack and Morrison, which was a design agency, web design agency. And we did really well. We grew it for 8 years. We peaked at 35 full-time staff, 10 contractors. We had a 3-story office in Covent Garden, which is central London. We were doing really well. It was going really well, and then I had this awful year. I don't know. You might know it. You might have heard.
I might have read about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
What happened?
Well, so I got married to the mother of my 2 children, and 3 months into the marriage, I'd found out she'd been having an affair all year with my best friend. Someone who, one of my best 3 friends, I'd say, and someone who was at the wedding, at my stag do.
How did you even find out?
She was being weird, and she's been really weird. And we went out to dinner one evening, and she said, "I've got my Christmas party coming up. Do you want to come?" I was like, "Yeah, cool. Where is it?" She said, "London." And we had this rule that we wouldn't go. We'd only get babysitters for our kids if we're in Bedford, where we live. Otherwise, no, we won't do that. You can, only one would go. And I said, "Oh no, I can't go because it's London. We won't get babysitters." So I said, I won't go. You go. You enjoy yourself." And she smiled, and I was like, "Hold on, you're glad I can't come?"
Oh, weird.
And at that point, I just sat there. I was like, I knew it. And as soon as I knew who it was as well. So he used to work for me, and I left that company, and she stayed working at the company. And so I went home that night, got up in the morning, and for the first time in our entire relationship, in like 12 years, I checked her email. I was like, something's going on here. And I found a picture of him holding his dick, and that was sent a month before our wedding.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, a month before our wedding.
I mean, did that just destroy you?
Not really to begin with. I was kind of like, oh, well, this is fucked. That's the end of that. I knew instantly because of the date. Mm-hmm. It wasn't like some old kiss or something you get over. It was sent a month before our wedding, wow. And so I was like, right, that's over. That's our relationship done. So I kicked her out, told her she had to move out.
What year was this?
It's 2013. So we got married in the July, and that was November, and that happened. So I could tell you a funny story. It always makes me laugh, this bit. So I went up to her. She was in bed. I went and woke her up, and I said, "Claire, why is there a picture of Richard's penis in your email?" And she goes, "What are you doing going through my email?" And I was like,
my God.
We're not having that conveison."
Is that how you broke it to her?
Yeah. So, I mean, look, it was an awful time, but I was out with my son this weekend. We go on these big walks. My son lives with me full time. We go on these big walks and we're talking. And for the first time in a long time, he's asked about it, and I don't tell him everything. But he was like, "Yeah, how are you about it?" And I was like, "Look, if I can partition what you and your sister had to go through, I'm actually glad it happened, because it's changed my entire life. Like, I'm really fortunate with the life I had now. I'm glad it happened."
Wow.
So anyway, I kicked her out and tried to carry on running the company in London whilst being a 50-50 dad, which was mental, because I would get up at like 7 in the morning, maybe 6:30 in the morning, have the kids ready, have to get them in school by 8 to get the 8:30 train to get to London for 9:30, and then I'd have to be done by like 2:30 to get the train back to pick them up and then feed them, and it just like something was going to break. And
just
the first thing that broke was me. I ended up drinking a lot. It really hit me about 6 months after the separation.
Do you think it was the separation and finding out that she had been unfaithful, or was it kind of everything, the situation of working that much and going back and forth trying to be a good dad? Like what do you think broke it down where you felt like you wanted to turn to maybe alcohol or anything else?
It's a weird set of events how everything works out, and I'm glad a number of things happened. But no, it was the breakup. I was madly in love with her. Oh. She was the woman I wanted to spend my life with. I have 2 kids with her, and when we got married, we had a good life, 2 beautiful kids. I thought we had everything. I never saw it coming. In hindsight, you get to look back and go, well, do you know what? Was I looking at through rose-tinted glasses? Mm-hmm. You weren't very nice to me, and I was working too much, and I was big. I was a really big guy, and I was, whatever. So I can look, and I also look back at it and don't just blame her. I mean, what she did was fucking terrible. I mean, she's awful. But I also look back and see I wasn't a perfect person. I did a lot wrong. So that comes with age. But then the really bad stuff started. To happen.
Well,
so
and I know you were also dealing with stuff with your mom, right? Was that all at the same time?
That was after that. No,
okay.
So that was after that. So what happened was I started doing a lot of cocaine, almost daily. A lot. Because my friend introduced me to this website. He was like, "Pete, there's this really cool website where you can buy drugs." And I was like, "What?"
Oh, the Silk Road. Yeah.
Yeah. And he was like, "The Silk Road." And I was like, "You have to use this thing called Bitcoin." I was like, "This sounds amazing."
So that's how you learned about Bitcoin.
That's how I learned about Bitcoin. So I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Yeah, you buy this anonymous currency." I mean, we know it's not anonymous now, but he's like, "You buy this currency, it's anonymous. You go on the dark web and you can order the drugs you want, and you can check the reviews and make sure they don't sell crap, and it gets delivered to your door." And I was like, "This is the best thing ever." So I started buying a lot of cocaine on it.
When you first purchased Bitcoin for the Silk Road, how much was it then?
Oh, it was like $80.
How many did you have?
I would estimate, based on current prices, probably spent a couple of million on drugs.
I was gonna say, like, that's like a very expensive hit of coke. I
easily spent over 100 Bitcoin on the Silk Road, easily.
Oh my god.
Yeah, but like, you don't know that. You're not like, shall I buy this coke or like save this for 8 years and it'll be worth 50,000? You don't think like that. It's just like, give me the fucking coke. But that was years ago. I haven't done drugs in 7.5 years, I think it is.
Bitcoin is my drug.
An old life. Bitcoin's my drug. And whiskey. But what was bad is I wasn't in control of myself. So like, I don't care if people do drugs. I don't do drugs anymore. But what happens is it comes in the post. So rather than it being like 7 p.m. on a Saturday night and you're saying to your friends, come on, let's get some coke, it was like 10 a.m. on a Tuesday, and I'm really depressed because my relationship's broken up and I just do drugs all day. So that went on for a while, and then I got into a really bad state on my own one night, and then about a week after that I had a day where I was just doing drugs all day, and then I had something called an SVT, it's basically a heart thing, whereby your electrical pulses that trigger your heart, they all went fucking bananas, but I thought I was having a heart attack. Yeah, so I ended up in an ambulance, and I got a big telling off from the doctor, who was telling me that stupid, and next time it might be me in a coffin and blah blah blah. And so that was like, when they say you hit rock bottom, that was rock bottom. And from there I went to the doctors because I was like, I need to get off the drugs, and I need help with anxiety and depression. And
so you were finally ready to ask for help.
I knew I needed it at that point. I went through the period of casually doing drugs, and then went through the period of doing heavy drugs, then doing the period of hiding it, and then did the period of doing it at work, and then during the day, and then like my friends knowing something's fucked and me ignoring it, and then the denial bit, and then the reality. It's an absolute cliche of events, but it's fine. So I went to the doctors, and they were like, we can't get you into rehab we can't get you into a program for at least 6 weeks. So I was like, well, this is bullshit. So I went home and bought some more cocaine.
Oh, no.
And then but I tried to do it and had a panic attack, so I couldn't do it, so I left it. And then the next day I went back to it and again had a panic attack again. I was like, well, that's me cured. I can't do drugs anymore. So I never touched it again.
Well, that's kind of lucky. I mean, self-cured. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, I felt like that kind of helped me out a bit. And then, but I did go back to the doctor because I was having these awful anxiety attacks and panic attacks. And so he prescribed me antidepressants. And I got in the car and I was like, what is going on in my life? Like a year ago, I had this £3 million turnover company, beautiful family. I was about to get married. I'm now here. My company's collapsing. I'm a drug addict and I've got depression, and they're putting me on antidepressants. I was like, what is going on? This is fucked. So I sat there and I threw away the prescription, and I just looked on my phone, like alternatives to antidepressants, and I just found like meditation, yoga, and running. So I went and bought a pair of running trainers. I went running that day. I pretty much ran every day for a year. And pretty much, every time I had a panic attack, I would meditate, and I was going to the gym and doing yoga and everything, and that cured me. Wow. I don't get any of that shit anymore. But what also happened during that time? That's when my mum got sick. So halfway during that time, my mum got cancer.
Just another thing. I can't even imagine.
Yeah, so she was diagnosed with stage 3C ovarian cancer.
I'm sorry.
But that led to no, it's like these, like I say, it's everything leads to something else. And I always think like butterfly effect. Like if one of these things hadn't happened, where would I be? Because what happened was, she got sick, but also my company collapsed. But when it collapsed, it didn't collapse and we were bankrupt. It was collapsing, and we decided to wind it down. We said, there's some money in the business. We can put it all back in and grow it again, or we can take a breather and walk away. And we took a breather. We were like, let's take a breather and walk away. So we wound it down, and we ended up walking away with a bit of money. So I was like, right, I'm going to take a year off work. So I had a year off work, separated from my ex-wife. So I just flew over to Ireland all the time where my mum was and just hung out with her. I got to spend a lot of time with my mum, which I feel really fortunate about because my brother and sister didn't have that. I could go over whenever I go to her chemo sessions and hang out with her, or I'd cook her dinner, and she went vegan, so I went vegan with her, and we would share recipes, and it was I'm really glad I got that.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, you mentioned the butterfly effect. It must be an interesting feeling to just look back on that version of yourself. And it's clearly what led you to Bitcoin in some roundabout way. And now Bitcoin's pretty much your career, and it's going to make you one of the richest people on the planet.
Oh, I know that, but let me fill you in the gap though, because I tell you what was really interesting is that yeah, Mum was getting pretty sick. I tried to get her to consider cannabis oil, and she didn't want to do it. And then when she was I didn't realize how sick she was when we finally agreed to do it. She was pretty bad. She was within, God, 3 weeks of her death. But you don't know. The weird thing is, you see this person and they're okay, and then they get bad, and then they go, and it's just like you're not prepared for the chain of events. But she got to that point where it's like she would try anything, and she said, "Okay, I'll try the cannabis oil." So me and my dad were back at their house, and Mum was she was in hospital at that point. She couldn't come home at that point. And he was like, "How do we get this cannabis oil?" And I was like, "Okay, do you remember that cocaine problem I had?" He was like, "Yeah." I was like, "Well, so I used to buy it on this website on the dark web, and you buy it with this thing called Bitcoin, and that's how we do it." And he was like, "Okay, I don't understand what that means, but what do you need?" I was like, "Well, I need £600 for a Bitcoin."
It was £600 at the time?
Something like that, £500, £600.
Wow.
It was back end of December.
Like 2015 or?
back into 2016.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I went on Google, because when I was using the Silk Road, I was using local Bitcoins, and I went on Google and searched for buy Bitcoin. Up came this website, Coinbase, so I clicked on there, and I was like, okay, so I bought the Bitcoin. I went on the dark web, we bought the cannabis oil, it came about 3-4 days before Mum died. So she had it and she passed. January 12th. Gosh, I should remember this. I blocked these things out. January 12th, 2017. So I stayed at my dad's for a few days, and there was a little bit of Bitcoin left, and I was like, right, I'll just go back on Coinbase and sell it. So I went back on there to sell it, and then I saw this other thing, Ethereum. I was like, well, what the hell's this? So I was reading about that, and I Googled it, and there was like, whatever article I read convinced me this new wave of blockchain technologies are coming, and it's going to change everything. I was like, right. Well, I don't have a job. I've got money left over from this company. I'll buy some of this. So I went on. I basically sent I sent $5,000 to Coinbase and bought some Bitcoin and some Ethereum, and Ethereum was like $9.
Oh my gosh.
And then I was like, the next day I was like, I want some more of this. So I did it again. I ended up putting like $32,000 in, and then I bought loads of shit coins. And then that was start of 17, and that's the start of this current, well, what was that, 4 years and 2 months ago, the start of this current wave, and
unreal.
this is history.
Okay, so I have a couple questions, because that first time when you discovered Bitcoin and you were going to use it on Silk Road, you said you were buying local coins. I mean, what does that mean? Where did you buy it?
There's a website called Local Bitcoin. So you go on, it's just a marketplace for buyers and sellers of Bitcoin. So you just go on there and you just say someone's selling, you can buy it off them, and you would send the money to their bank account, and then they would send you the Bitcoin.
So you didn't read the white paper? You didn't know kind of the backstory of any of it?
No, I read some stuff. I read some articles online, just some, and I was like, I'll give this a go.
So when you got on Coinbase, did that kind of spark your research? I mean, when did you first start to really understand the blockchain technology and start to think, I really believe in this?
Not until after I started the podcast, because I was just like, this stuff looks interesting, I'm going to trade it. Mm-hmm. So I was, rather than reading about blockchain tech, I was reading a few news articles, but I spent a lot of time trying to learn about charting and chart patterns and trading this. Mm-hmm. And I did really well. I mean, I went up and down. I traded that 32,000 up to $1.2 million.
On Bitcoin?
No, all different altcoins
different things.
And shit coins. Yeah, so I did that, and then then we know what happened when the bear market hit, so most of that crashed down. But luckily I started the podcast during that period, so it was this real thing, like as my like money in my crypto was depleting, I just started to earn from the podcast, and they just crossed over at the right time for me to focus on the podcast.
Okay, so tell me how the podcast came about, because I know your friend was a podcaster, and my favorite country, Italy, is part of this story. Yeah. So I mean, you're buying on Coinbase, but what led you to start a show?
Well, I was still vegan at that time because I'd done it with my mum. I stuck it out, and then I'd bought a new car. I bought myself, because I started making some money with the Bitcoin. I was like, I'm going to buy a car. So I bought myself a Mercedes, and I was telling my friend, I was like, I've got a new car, it's a Mercedes. I was like, it's so cool. It's the first car I've had that connects to my phone. And he was like, oh, you need to get into podcasts. He's like, he said, when I go on big drives, I listen to podcasts. I'm like, what are those? He's like, oh, they're like radio shows. I was like, oh yeah, I know those. So I went on to Google, and I was like, best podcasts. And whatever website I found, the number one was Rich Roll. And so I listened, and there was a trailer, and I can't remember who the interview, but it's basically this guy who was an alcoholic who one night stumbled to his house and then climbed in the window because his key didn't work. But it turns out he climbed into the window of his neighbor, and his neighbor, tried to get into bed with his neighbor, and then he basically got accused of sexual assault, and then realized his life was a mess and would stop drinking. I was like, this story's fascinating. And I used to go running, and I just used to listen to Rich's podcast. And then one day I went to Google him, and I ended up on this second website, which was for this yoga retreat they were running in Italy. I was like, I think I need to go to this, and I don't know why. So I phoned them up and spoke to his assistant. She said, we've got one place left. I'm like, that's it. That's my sign. I'm taking it. So I flew out to Pisa, hired a car, drove up to... Well, actually, it wasn't actually in Florence. It was near Florence. It was like in the region.
Uh-huh.
So anyway, and I get there, and I read Rich's book before I got there, and then there was a note from him where he was saying... He just wrote me a note saying, I know your story. He said, mine's very similar. If you've read my book, I went through a very similar situation. So he went on, his wife left him on his honeymoon.
Oh, man.
So he was on his honeymoon. She was being weird, and she left him. So he went through that same shit that I did. And his poison was alcohol. And so we went out running, and me and him hung out. And it was I can't explain this event, but basically 40 people who were broken in one way or another in their life had just turned up at this event. And we did some weird hippie shit, like held hands and said like something like where there's a big fire and just weird stuff where I was just like, what is going on? This is so weird. But like every day we'd get up in the morning, go for a run, then we'd do yoga, and then we'd do like these classes and hippie stuff and hang out. And then we got to the final day, and everyone had gotten so well. I'm still friends with a number of people from it, but we all sat around in this big chair, like a group of chairs, and it was like, how are you feeling at the end of this week? And I was like halfway around the thing, and the first person spoke, and she just burst into tears. It's just floods of tears telling her story. And then basically that's what happened on every single chair. Like even the toughest, hardest dude there, this guy who was really quiet, he broke down. And it was about 4 hours of these 40 people just crying their eyes out because everyone was fucked. Like a marriage had broken up or lost a baby or like some shit had gone on.
And that's why everyone went on the trip. It feels like a Tony Robbins like seminar conference.
It totally was. So I got to the end of it and I left that thinking, this is so weird. Like everything's so weird. But Richard said to me, he said, look, if you're ever in LA, look me up. And I'm like, oh, I'm just going to fucking come out. You're cool. I want to hang out with you. So I booked a flight to LA like 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later. And I went out and went up to the house and hung out with him. And I can't remember if it was that trip or another trip. I had a friend who was living on Venice Beach. Basically, right on Venice Beach, he had a... they split them sometimes into multiple apartments.
Yeah, yeah.
His was like the top penthouse one with like a deck, and he was like, "You can come and stay whenever you want." I was like, "I'm coming all the time." Anyway, one trip I was there thinking, right, this crypto stuff's cool. but I think I need to do a podcast. So I called up Rich and I was like, Rich, I need to do a podcast. What do you do? And he's like, well, check out the Pat Flynn course, buy all this stuff, and then tell me how you get on. So I went on Amazon, I bought all the equipment, and then I contacted Luke Martin. I messaged him on Twitter, said, dude, I'm going to launch a podcast. Do you want to be the first guest? He went, yeah. So I got an Uber up to him, recorded the first show, and then when I got back to England, I recorded the second one with Nick Patel. And then I messaged Jameson Lopp, and I was like, hey man, I've launched a podcast. I've done 2 episodes. I wanted to do a tech show. Can I record with you? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, also, I've never shot a gun, and I keep seeing pictures of you with guns. Can I like come out and hang out with you and shoot guns? He was like, yeah. So I flew out to Raleigh, and we went out and shot guns. Yeah, recorded the 3rd show. And then I didn't record another show for 2 months, and I was like, I need to take this seriously. And then since then, I've never missed a week.
So did you want the podcast to be about Bitcoin, or were you thinking crypto in general, tech? I mean, what was the original kind of idea in your head?
It was crypto, but mainly Bitcoin. Like I was into the crypto, but like I knew Bitcoin was the main thing to be focused on.
And no one else was really doing it, right?
No, there was. Laura Shin was doing Unchained.
Okay, yeah, I know that one.
And she was doing a great job. And there were a couple of other smaller ones, but she was the one, like, she was running things. And then about the time I launched one, this other one launched called Crypto Street, which is a bit more for traders. But you know what it's like now. There's loads of us.
Yeah. So how did you get some of the guests that you have? I mean, you have all of probably the biggest people. Now you're one of the, I would say original memers. That's what I'm going to call you guys, or evangelists of Bitcoin. How did you get, the Saifedeans, the Winklevosses, and all the big guests that you've had on your show?
Do you know what? Just being a relentless terrier, like pestering people, really. I mean, what I originally did, Natalie, was I used to do all my interviews in person. So I think that was like when Jameson Lopp saw that, he was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. And I was like, can you introduce me to Charlie Lee? And he did. I said, Charlie, I'm in the UK, but I want to come out to San Francisco and interview you. And he was like, yeah, all right. So because I used to do them in person, I think that was like a bit of a pull. Like I would go and turn up. I mean, what I would do is, I think I told you about this before. I'd fly out for 3 weeks. So I'd go to New York, do a few, go to Florida, do 2, go to Portland and do 1, go to San Fran and do 3, go to LA and do 2. Like I would do them all in person because I think the interviews are significantly better in person.
I agree.
And that built the rapport with the guests. And then when you're with somebody, like sat next to them, it's a lot easier to say, look, you're friends with so-and-so. Can you introduce me?
Yeah.
And they would go, okay. Rather than like if you did a remote one.
Right.
And some I pestered, some I just don't stop sometimes. Like at the moment, I'm trying to get Harvey Weinstein, and I'm just not stopping, and I'm not going to stop till I get it. So yeah, it's a lot of pestering, a lot of hard work. I'm fortunate now, like because the show's, it does what it does. Like it's approaching 1 million downloads a month.
It's amazing.
It's a lot. It's a lot easier to get guests now,
of
and
course.
they come to me sometimes, which makes it a lot easier. But it was just relentless pressure.
I mean, after how long did you notice that your podcast was really getting a following and you were able to monetize it? Because it feels to me like everyone has a podcast, right? I mean, I have a podcast. Everybody, my neighbor has a podcast. My dog walker has a podcast. But not everyone's able to create a show that actually has a following and has ads and sponsors. So at what point did that happen for you?
Oh, that's a good question. I think the first time I felt like I was doing something good here was when I did my Mt. Gox series. I wasn't really making money at that point, but I kind of knew I was. Maybe I was making a little bit. Maybe I was making a little bit back then. I can't remember, but that was the first time I felt like I'm really onto something here.
Yeah.
Like I'm telling a story. I didn't do a great job of it, but it's really hard to say because it all just happens. Like. I don't know where 4 years have gone, Natalie. I just don't know. We're here 4 years later talking about it. I can't say there was ever a time I thought, oh, shit, looks like I've made it. Looks like I've hit... There was just... every month the numbers go up a bit more. Suddenly one day somebody says to you, I'll write you a check. And I got my... It's funny, I put it all up on my website.
Yeah, you're public about all that.
Yeah,
show the
from
profit.
because there's so many scammers. From like the first check, I was like, I'm just going to publish these, and then I did these income reports. But like August 18, I got my first check. It was 1,737.79, and then it just went up and up and up. I think probably the point when I signed Kraken as a sponsor, because it was a big deal for me. Like it was a 6-figure deal. It was a big deal. That felt like actually this can become a business. But there's no real one moment. There's just it just happens. Okay,
so tell me how you got from, buying Bitcoin online, not really knowing anything about it and using it on the illicit Silk Road to being an expert. At what point
I am not an expert.
Well, obviously talking to the people that you do, I'm sure you've absorbed their knowledge, but you must have read the Bitcoin Standard, right?
Yeah, everything in that book apart from modern art is interesting.
Yeah, so did you just research along the way, or were you looking up, all your guests? Are you reading a ton of articles? Like, how did you gain your knowledge about Bitcoin? And as you learned more about it, did it kind of solidify your belief that this is really the future of sound money?
Do you want me to let you in on a secret?
Of course.
I interview amazing people, some of the smartest people I've ever met, and most interesting people. Robert Breedlove.
Yeah.
Not only is he carved out of marble and good looking and intelligent, but like he just gets Bitcoin at another level. Nick Carter, just a fabulous speaker. Parker Lewis. I could just list you off all these people. They're incredible, right? I struggle with very technical things. I just never have. Like I can do some HTML, but when I tried to learn JavaScript, I couldn't do it, so I gave up. I struggle with economics. I struggle with anything which is complex. Mm-hmm. What I'm good at, I always feel, is I'm good at creatives. I can write stories. I'm writing a screenplay at the moment. Just for me, I'm trying to make films. I know what a good banner looks like. I know what a good advert. I've always been a creative. So really, all my podcast is me getting these really smart people and saying, can you explain this to me? And when they explain it, I say, no, you need to explain that a bit more. And I'll be like, oh, I just don't get that. Can you explain that better? Well, what does this mean? All I am doing is I'm basically a moron just saying,
you're being so modest.
No, I promise, I swear to you. And I tell you how I know this, because when people interview me, I can talk to you about my history and what I've done. If you were asking me complex ideas around Bitcoin, I'm really bad at answering them. And that's why I don't like doing interviews which are about Bitcoin. And I think that's why I don't get invited on to do like deep talks on Bitcoin. I'm just not very good at it. So all I've done is I just say, explain this shit to me. And it seems like there is a big audience of that. Yeah. So I get emails from people who listen and they're just like, oh, thank you for getting people to explain that.
For sure.
Like I'm a 5-year-old. And I've just been really fortunate to have that. And somewhere down the line, during that process, I've kind of come to the realization, like, this is kind of a big deal. I kind of get why. Not 100%. I'm not 100% in, but I kind of get why. And I'm happy dedicating this current period of my life to it.
Yeah. No, I think you ask great questions. I think you're also being modest because you clearly have such a background in crypto and the history of Bitcoin, and I think also insight into where it's going. And so I guess what I want to ask you, how did we get to this place where we're in a pandemic and you guys are kind of taking over Twitter and you have this community, you all know one another, and you're pushing the belief that Bitcoin can really solve a lot of the problems of government and central banks and the financial institutions and inflation we're seeing right now? Like, how did we get here? It feels like it just happened in the last year.
Well, I think we have to be fair to the people who've been around a long time and say this has been happening since the start of Bitcoin. The people who've been around a long time deserve so much respect because they have fought battles, they've gone through civil wars, attacks on Bitcoin from every angle, like every single angle, and they've just kept plugging away. Think of it like an immune system. You keep attacking that immune system, either it kills the host or it becomes stronger. And what's happened is just becomes stronger and stronger. And these people are like, we don't give a shit. Yeah. You can be with us or against us. We don't care. Because they know you can't kill Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the apex predator, like Robert Breedlove was saying to Pump the other day. You cannot kill Bitcoin. They've tried. They've tried every single way to kill Bitcoin. You can't kill it because it's so well designed. And now these people are like, do you know what? Fuck you. You need us more than we need you.
Yeah.
You know, fuck you. And
you're the Citadel.
now,
we just want, the keys to the Citadel.
And you've got some rich people who don't give a damn either.
Yeah.
And, and they have been proven right over and over and over. And we're seeing it now during this pandemic. Like, everything they've been saying about money and government, they've been saying this stuff for years, since 2008, the financial crisis there, and they've been saying it all the way through. Government and central banks are the problem. And now we're seeing it. We're 1.9 trillion the other day, the stimulus bill in the US. Yeah. And Pierre Rochard did the calculation. He's like, well, if you divide that by the population of the United States, that's not $1,400 each. If you divide that by the population, that's 5,200. So where is the other, what's that, 3,400 going or whatever? Where's that going?
Well, sure, yeah. They're always packing in other things in there, and no one has an accounting of anything.
They know the money is the problem. They know the corrupt people around money is the problem.
What do you want people to know?
I've got a question for you.
What's the question for me?
So you came in quite ballsy the other day in a tweet and started replying, calling people shitcoiners and whatever. I was like, oh, hello. Here we go. So how quickly did you do the crypto thing, or did you just get it straight away as Bitcoin only?
So I first bought not really understanding Bitcoin. I was kind of pulled into it, and I thought this is interesting. And it wasn't until I read the Bitcoin Standard that I sort of got it, and I was fascinated by the history of currency and just what fiat was, and then I had to read Bitcoin Standard twice because it's so dense. And if you don't have an economic background, like I've spent 10 years as a journalist. I report on everything under the sun, but very broad general terms. And I focus more on people's emotions and people's experiences as opposed to very technical things. So I just really wanted to draw out as much knowledge as possible. And then seeing it really take off, I was just kicking myself because it's like, I understand it now. I feel like I completely agree with the theories, the thesis of the future. And yet I was always too scared. Like there was something always pulling me back from just going all in. For me, I think it's because I come from an immigrant background. Like every dollar matters so much, and you don't want to see it just evaporate, which I'm not saying would happen with Bitcoin, but it's just, you put it away, and there's just a sense of worry that will you have security? Like my family's first generation. So my big thing is I just need to make sure that I'm safe with my investments. But if I don't invest, I'm just leaving it in the bank for it to deflate. So yeah, I got into it, and then I got into the meme world, and I follow all of you guys. I'm fascinated by you. I wanted to know all of your backstories. And so, yeah, I shot my shot. I started reaching out, and I'm hoping to talk to you and some of your friends some more, and I want a key to the Citadel. Like that's what I want.
You want to get your own Citadel. Well, yeah. I think it's fascinating that you managed to. I tell you one thing though. Get your copy of your Bitcoin Standard. Go towards the back. There's a whole section on modern art. Tear it out and burn that shit. I think Safety's done a very good job with that book, but his opinions on modern art are subjective, and they've got nothing to do with money. So burn that shit. Okay,
wait. Last thing I forgot to ask you about is obviously mining. So you're a miner. You're a miner.
No, not anymore. No, I lost $500,000 mining. I don't do that anymore.
Okay, because a lot of people wonder about that, and I think that there's such a misconception. Even when I first started learning about Bitcoin, I was like, mine? Like you're mining through data, trying to find a Bitcoin number key, and now I completely understand the concept. But for so many people that are out there that don't get it, is there a simple explanation that you can give to mining and all these claims that mining's terrible for the environment?
My simple explanation is you should interview Jimmy Song and ask him about it, because I'll do a terrible job. He'll do a much better job. And I lost so much money in mining because I'm a moron.
Really?
I keep away from it. But yeah. To explain mining takes a long time. Basically, it's the process. Look, it's what gives Bitcoin value. It has to be mined. You have to expend energy and cost to mine Bitcoin. You have to want to do it. That's proof of work. That's a fundamental layer of Bitcoin. but I think you should interview Jimmy Song because he will do a really good job with that, and I can introduce you to him.
So are you one of the people that are maximalists? Like, are you saying do you put everything into Bitcoin and hodl and ride it out, and you think that's the future?
I do, yeah. I'm
100%.
I'm even more than that. I'm irresponsibly long. Like,
wow.
I've been gradually growing, and then from about when 10K looked settled, I started putting all my business and personal money in there. And then I even at one point, just for a laugh, took out a loan and bought a load more Bitcoin. I just put everything in there, and I am, I'm in a very healthy position.
You took out a loan?
As long as just for a laugh. Like, so what happened was, do you not see that? So when Michael Saylor announced his loan?
Yeah, yes, of course.
I was like, well, I'm front running this. So the Bitcoin price dropped to $17,500, and I was laying in bed. I was like, well, I can't put any more business money because I've put it all in Bitcoin.
Oh my gosh.
I can't put any personal money because it's all in Bitcoin, right? All I ever keep is 6 months personal and business cash flow. Everything else has gone in.
Okay.
So I just went on the bank. I was like, how much money will you give me now? 50? No. 40? No. 35? Yep, take it. So I bought 2.55 Bitcoin at $17,500.
Oh my gosh.
And I keep I got so much shit for this. But that's if Michael Saylor can do it, I can do it.
Yeah. And you got a Lambo?
Not yet. I just like to wind people up.
Okay.
Because they're like, don't spend your money on a Lambo. I'm like, well, I'm going to get a Lambo.
Okay. Well, since you're so good at boiling things down to a 5-year-old understanding, I want to ask you, for people out there that are just getting into it, because let's face it, the majority of the world is just still not in Bitcoin, or they don't understand it. Mm-hmm. How would you explain Bitcoin? It's
magic internet money. You buy
That's
it,
the first
you wait
response
4 years.
On Google.
You buy it, you wait 4 years, and you're rich. No, listen, look, the best and simplest explanation is the one Vijay Boyapati said. He said it's like gold. It's the digital version of gold, and it has these two magical properties that gold doesn't have, in that it's easily divisible and you can teleport it to anywhere in the world. Mm-hmm. So basically, imagine you had gold, because the problem with gold is, like, Natalie, if I wanted to send you $50 of gold, I'd have to get my lump of gold and chisel a bit off and post it to you and hope it gets to you.
Yeah.
And whereas you can give me a Bitcoin address and I can send it to you and it's with you instantly.
Right.
So I think that's a really good explanation. But I think you have to then also say to people, they're like, well, why should I care about gold? Most people don't own gold. I know my friends own gold. And it's like, well, then I say, look, what you need to do is understand why gold is important. And gold is important because it's what is known as a store of value. It holds value. This is the reason governments hold it, central banks hold it, rich people hold it. It's because if there's currency fluctuations or if there's ever an impending war, they know they want to have that gold as that reliable currency, mm-hmm. that reliable money. Well, we've got a digital version now. It's Bitcoin. And it's even better than gold because you can teleport it and it's divisible. And it's even better than gold because there's a lot of gold in the bottom of the ocean and in mines. We know Bitcoin is 21 million and that's it.
Yeah.
And I say, consider it a savings technology. Simple economic supply and demand. If more people want it, it's going to get more expensive. You can put away 100 quid, £200, $200 a month. You treat that like a long-term savings plan. And if Bitcoin continues to act like the form of gravity it is, it'll prove to be a good investment.
Yeah, I mean, the appreciation, especially when you compare it to other assets, is just, it speaks for itself. It's incredible. So, okay, I have a couple Bitcoin questions that I want to ask you. Mm-hmm. Do you believe that Bitcoin will exist alongside fiat? Because obviously right now there's all this conversation of the euro collapsing, our US dollar being completely devalued, inflation that hasn't been seen since Germany. So can they coexist?
Yes, and I think they most likely are for a certain period of time. I buy the reason why fiat money might collapse and Bitcoin become the dominant form of money, but ultimately I do think it will tend to be an asset that sits alongside fiat. I think you may get begin to get certain countries or smaller states who maybe test the idea of having it as a reserve currency for them. I buy Balaji's argument that India should buy it, but let's just say, let's just pick a small country that might consider it, maybe a Paraguay or El Salvador or a Chile might go, let's do this, an Argentina, whatever. I buy the argument for it, but I still believe you need a sovereign currency. I don't want it, but it's not that you need it. I just believe that we're structured in that way.
Yeah.
That it will exist for a while. It could collapse. We could get into a world where there's no government, no the whole sovereign individual thing, which Robert Breedlove talks about. We could get there. It's very hard to predict, but I don't think the state is going to let their currencies just collapse and the world to be run by Bitcoiners just yet. I think there's certainly going to be conflict over it first.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. I mean, I keep thinking about, as I learn more about Bitcoin, right now my biggest hurdle is trying to understand sort of the Lightning Network and how to make the validations faster, because, we're used to very instant transactions with like credit cards, or if, you're in the store and you pay cash. How do we get...
Why though?
What?
Do you want... Why though? Do you want to spend your Bitcoin?
Well, I'm saying if it were to take over as a currency, what's the future in terms of quick validations and transactions?
The Lightning Network is the future, but I don't worry too much about the Lightning Network right now, because we're still in the stage where it doesn't make sense to sell your Bitcoin. So therefore it doesn't make sense to spend it.
Right.
I still think the Lightning Network is early. I still think it's being developed. still think it's maturing. Nick Barty's book Layered Money is a very good starting point to understand this. I used to be like, well, no one really uses Lightning Network, so what a load of bullshit that is. And then I realized it's like it doesn't matter. It's got this headwind. It's got this all this time to develop and mature, whilst Bitcoin, the base layer, does what that does.
Yeah.
So I don't worry about that too much right now.
Do you think that Saylor will ever be liquidated?
What's your scenario for that?
He's truly gone all in, and his statements about this kind of being the if we're a planet, Bitcoin sort of swallowing everything else around it and being that giant, magma in the center that's just growing larger and larger to what did he say, $500 trillion cap? I mean, do you believe that, or do you think at some point he will sell? Well,
I don't know. I think he's doing a great job of promoting his investment, and it's incredible. I think he's learned a lot about Bitcoin very quickly. I think he's a great spokesman for Bitcoin at times.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things about Bitcoin you got to remember is, like, sometimes you have to slay your heroes. I'm sure people are keeping an eye on him, seeing what his intentions are. I believe they're mostly good. I think sometimes maybe he misses the mark, like I've missed the mark, like other people have. I think he's been so hugely important, though, for Bitcoin. I think he's smart, very smart. I respect him hugely. I wouldn't want to second guess what his plan is. I think he's in it. I think he's in this for the long run. And I don't think he will sell his Bitcoin, because I don't think he needs to. I think he probably has everything he needs in life.
Yeah. I mean, he's already made how many billions off of it? It's amazing. Yeah. So for people that don't know, what's the laser eyes to 100K? Can you explain how that came about? You helped me get my laser eyes.
You're very welcome. It was I can't remember his name, RD_BTC. He just sent me this. He said, put this in, keep your laser eyes focused till we get 100,000. And then we dipped down to 43.
Do you think
it's just a meme.
Do you think it's going to happen this year, like the stock to flow model predicts?
Hell yes. I think history would say that this is just another market cycle. We'll have another bear market. I got wrapped up in the meme that Bitcoin was going to 33K in the last cycle. When it hit 20K, I didn't sell because I was like, well, it's going to go back up. And it didn't. And it went down and down and down. And I missed my opportunity to sell. I have no intention of selling any Bitcoin now. My mindset's changed. But I'm careful and I'm reticent to follow entirely. I'll listen to the ideas, but I think you have to just react to the market. I still think we will have a peak FOMO, and I still think we will probably have a bear market. But the bear market this time might be very different. It might be shorter, not as deep. It might be very different.
So I've been following the stock market here in the U.S. very closely, and there are some macro strategists that are predicting, with all the the money printer going burr here in the U.S., that we're going to have a pretty massive stock market crash. And if obviously everything's so global now, do you see Bitcoin crashing along with the market and following that, or at some point, the Bitcoin going up while the market goes down?
So it does correlate at times. The COVID March 13th event, stock market crash, Bitcoin crash.
Yeah, I wish I bought way more at that point.
Yeah, tell me about it. But yeah, it does. Yeah, there are certain correlations. The black swan events, big market crashes. You can see a sell-off in Bitcoin as well because of what the asset means to people. But at the same time, I think when the market's steady, bopping around, Bitcoin right now isn't entirely correlated, but it could be during a black swan event or a significant event.
Do you ever think about how governments will react if Bitcoin does kind of take off and it does get to these crazy prices and the value of currencies like the US dollar just completely collapse? Do you think that they would try to, because I'm back here in the US and FDR, in the 20s, he taxed gold an insane amount. And I mean, obviously countries have tried to ban people from owning a type of currency. I don't see that happening with Bitcoin, but could they make it difficult to own a Bitcoin to try to preserve the power of a central bank?
I mean, I think it depends on the country. Yeah, I think Brazil, Russia, India, China will have a very different strategy than the UK, France, Germany, and the US. But I certainly think we've got tough times ahead.
Yeah.
I don't think they'll ban it in the Western nations, but they certainly might regulate the hell out of it. But we have good people at Coin Center, and we have good people in the industry trying to fight this. I do think it's going to get quite messy. I do think there's going to be a fight. I just don't see them banning it. I just see them trying to regulate the hell out of it.
Do you have a lot of people coming to you that are just the naysayers and the Peter Schiffs of the world that are like, why do you believe in this? You're going to lose everything if you keep going down this road.
Not anymore.
Really?
Not anymore. I think, no, it used to be like that kind of embarrassing thing. I'm into Bitcoin. Oh, do you do CrossFit as well? I bet you're a vegan. But that's the magic 3. But no, not now. People are like, shit, I think this is the real deal. I get a lot of people coming now and asking questions, and friends reaching out on Facebook or Instagram and saying, Pete, can I ask you a few questions? So, I mean, I think the problem you got with the naysayers, the Nouriels, the Talebs, I think they take a position. They're not the kind of person who sits down and go, do you know what? I think I was wrong. I mean, they are wrong. Peter Schiff has been wrong for so long. His tweets are embarrassing, and they're actually,
the interactions are amazing. I love it.
I know, but he's actually dishonest. What he's doing is wrong, because he's repeating arguments through every cycle, and it's dishonest. He's saying this bubble. He's been saying a bubble that's going to pop from like $1.
Yeah. So the last couple fun questions. Who's the best Bitcoin memer?
Ooh, who's the best Bitcoin memer? I think Pierre Rochard, because I think his has a level of intelligence and wit that is above people sometimes.
Okay. He's
very smart in his memes. Very, very smart. And his make me think sometimes. I have to take a step back and go, okay, I need to think about this one. But he's good.
Okay. Is Raoul Pal good or bad for Bitcoin on the whole?
He's good. I mean, he's a shitcoin. I tell him to his face he's a shitcoin. Do you know me and him have got a bet?
No.
Yeah, so we got an Ethereum bet. I bet him that the price of Ethereum will drop against Bitcoin over the year, and he said it'll go up. And we're about even from when the bet was made a month ago. And if I lose, I've got to pay for him to get a business class flight from Cayman to London and take him out for dinner. And if I win, he's got to buy me a business class flight from London to Cayman and go for dinner.
That's amazing.
So it's a really interesting bet. I love Rao, but he's just doing the whole shitcoin thing, and I don't know why. I think he will. I think he's wrong, but like I get why people do it. It's fine, but I think he's wrong.
At what price per Bitcoin would you go, okay, I have to cash one of these out and buy something crazy?
$200,000.
Really? That's it? You're not going to hodl at 200?
That's the price of a Lambo.
That's so weak. I'm going to hodl at 200.
You can get a whole Lambo for that. You asked me the question, and now you're calling me weekend.
Okay, you're gonna get your Lambo. I know. No, I'm holding to $1 million. I'll definitely take one out. I'm still waiting to become a millionaire. So, what do you think of Dogecoin?
Shitcoin.
Shitcoin.
It's funny. It's a funny one. Yeah, but it's not funny when people lose money.
Yeah.
So, like, I love the community. I love the history, what it's done. But in the end, it's a shitcoin that people lose money on.
Yeah. Final thoughts on Bitcoin.
I just love it. I think it's so much fun. Like, are you not having fun?
I'm having more fun than I've ever had. I'll tell you that.
Dude, I'm. You know what? Before this pandemic, I was flying around the world, hanging out with some of the coolest, smartest people. I felt so, honestly, so blessed. You know, we talked about what happened a few years ago, and it was awful. It was just awful. And I feel so lucky now just to do this amazing job with amazing people. And you know, I get like 30 emails a day from people who listen to the podcast saying thank you so much. And it's like, it's a real blessing to be in this position. And it was just so much fucking fun. Like going online and telling Peter Schiff to fuck off. And just meme him or call him a dinosaur. And it's just fun. I'm having so much fun.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Coin Stories. I'd love to connect with you if you have questions or guest requests, so feel free to get in touch on Twitter @NatBrunell or Instagram @Natalie Brunell. Take care till next time.